You know, I've really been looking forward to doing this. I'm really glad to finally be able to get around to doing it. So, before we start, there's a few things you should know about my tastes and, you know, my experiences. Now, everything in this review is going to be spoiler-free until the discussion points at the end. I don't like intros, so we're just going to go straight to it.
Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try! Perfect mayhem!
I'll tell you what I have played. I've played Dragon Quest VIII, which I really liked. That was easily a 10 out of 10. The soundtrack, oh man, oh. Then you've got Final Fantasy IV, that was really good. Tales of Berseria, and Final Fantasy X, just to name a few. So they were pretty good ones, and they were the ones that I'm kind of into, and those are ones I would recommend to any JRPG fan, to be honest with you. Now, in terms of the audience, I would say it's targeted at about 12 plus or 15 plus. There is some strong themes like grief, death, betrayal, loss, but there's also things about friendship and inner being, and I would say some of these are quite mature themes, but there's no reason why anybody who's of a younger sort of age can't enjoy this. Newcomers will like this as well. So here's what the plot focuses on. It's based in a place called Midgand. It also shares a bit of history with Tales of Berseria, but the events, they're not quite linked, it's just kind of in the same universe. The plot itself involves emotion versus reason. You could say it's our main protagonist against sort of the religious forces, the forces that believe in reason and the good of the majority over the minority. So there's some conflict there, and there is a strong focus on those elements. Things like betrayal happen, death. There's a lot of death. I'll try to keep out spoilers, but there is a lot of death. There's also a lot of vengeance as well. I would say players will find themselves relating to the way Velvet thinks, and Velvet's our main protagonist, by the way. So that wraps up this section. We're going to move on now to the good stuff.
Killing Flash! Behold the arts of my ancestors! Time gets a shot!
As far as standard JRPG games go, this is one of the better looking ones. And it would be too, because this is one of the most recent JRPGs, and it's also the most recent Tales game at the moment. We do have a remaster coming soon of Vesperia. I'm really excited about that, by the way, but I digress. Everything looks quite pretty as a general sort of critique. There's a good amount of facial expressions used on the characters, especially Margilu and all the other characters too, especially in the visual novel style skits as well.
Maybe there's more to it. It did belong to a cat's.
I cannot say why, but I have this sudden urge to leave everything else behind and wear only this towel.
Please don't.
Oh, if you insist. I guess even demons have some lines they shouldn't cross.
Yes, definitely.
That's enough, you two. Let's just start heading to Mount Killer House.
So as you can see, it's a pretty visually interesting way to convey some plot elements, side quests, and just show off the characters' personalities. Now, there is some language subtitle errors, and you know, I like having subtitles on. I don't know why. I just always have it on. And I noticed just so many typos every now and then, and it was so strange. I don't know if it was because of the translation error or whatnot, but whatever the case, it does need an update, I think. This is specifically for the PC version, though. That's the one I have the most experience with. Now, on the other hand, there was some problems that I noticed. The overworld was sometimes just so boring, and it just felt like, it was pretty, but it just felt like it needed more elements to it, more interest, more objects, more landmarks, and things like that. Because as it stands, most of the overworld is really nice backgrounds, but that's all it is to me, in my opinion, of course. It just seems like a really nice background, and it shouldn't really be like that, I think. When you revisit some of these overworlds and you gotta travel from point A to point B, it can make it a little boring, despite some elements implemented to entertain you and make your second pass worthwhile. This game also includes some anime-style cutscenes which are for important points in the game, and as always I'm going to keep this part spoiler-free. But they were really good, they were well animated, colourful, vibrant, characters' expressions were really nice. I've got no bad points about this one, so that's a thumbs up from me. So that wraps up this part. Now we're going to go on to the soundtrack!
Ready to die? Whatever comes next. This is just the first step. To kill you! Howling Dragon!
So there's a few things I could say about the soundtrack, but I think this section would be best if you listened more than anything. Overall, it's a decent soundtrack. It's slightly above average for what I would consider in the JRPG world. The town soundtracks are good. The battle themes are mostly good. The main theme is really nice. The main theme is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to play some samples of some of the good tracks and some of the bad ones. First, the good ones. This one's called Time to Relax, and it plays during a part where all the characters are having downtime. Okay, now this one's the main menu theme, and it's unignorable because it's the main menu theme. It captures our protagonist's dark side and confliction and her emotion. Quite a somber track that one is. Now, the last good one we're going to look at is actually the OST that was used for the final dungeon. That's what I'm talking about. You want to build tension for a final dungeon, that's how you do it. Real good stuff there. Now we're going to look at some of the bad ones. This one's called The Evil Surging on Prison Island. This is where our protagonist begins to go through with her plans, and it's going to be at the expense of others. But I didn't really like this one. This next one's called Flames of Vengeance, and I think this just happens when something surprising takes place and it leads to a boss battle. I don't even remember when this happened, to be honest with you, but I know it was in there. So like I said, the soundtrack is pretty good. It's just not like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 good. It feels more like a 7 or 8 out of 10 kind of good. A lot of effort went into it, but some tracks just don't resonate well with me personally. So we've explored how the game sounds, we've explored how it looks. Now we're going to see how well it plays and how good are the mechanics really. Does it make you want to play more? Well, we're going to find out in this next bit.
Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try! Perfect mayhem!
Alright, you might want to grab yourself a drink or a beer or whatever else you're into. Let's go over the main aspects of the gameplay. Fighting in this game is actually quite entertaining and there is quite a bit to do. You can create a variety of combos, and you get some combo bonuses when you match up certain moves with the other. You unlock more stuff as you go throughout the game and you level up. You unlocked different categories of combos, so different arts, different art types, and really powerful finisher moves, so when you want to take down really hard bosses and things like that. Does it work? Yeah, for the most part. When you're on the easier difficulties, it can become a bit of a button mashing equals win scenario, but they have plenty of difficulty options if you want to scale yourself up, and it comes with its own rewards too, better equipment, and other surprises along the way as well, so there's something to look forward to when you're putting that amount of effort. It's worth mentioning that the AI can be a bit dodgy sometimes, but you might find options in the strategy options to maybe get around that. Code Red hunts are special kind of monsters that appear in dungeons and fields. If you want to hunt them down, there are rewards for that too. So that gives you something else to do when you want to revisit places, maybe take a second pass, and as I'm sure a lot of you JRPG fans will do, I found myself doing that, and it does help keep things entertaining, but I didn't find them too difficult. I suppose it wouldn't be difficult if I did that much grinding. But there's also the dire foes too. The dire foes appear only when you've reached certain conditions in battle and you've got consistently good ranking. Once you've got the ranking consistent where you are, you might find a dire foe appear, but that foe only appears on certain difficulties as well, so you might want to play around with that, and it can be a lot of fun to make the dire foe appear. And it can be quite terrifying too. Travelling in the overworld at first is alright, like I mentioned, it makes for a pretty nice background, but that's the problem. A lot of it is just background, and once something's a background, it becomes just that. It becomes something that you don't really pay attention to. It just feels like elements are missing, highlights are missing, objects are missing, you know, landmarks, things like that. And it makes for a very boring second time run. Because you know what to expect, you know what's there, and sometimes the overworld travel is just so slow. It's so slow sometimes, especially in the larger ones where your map cursor doesn't even move. There are efforts to fix this problem, and I appreciate it. I'm not going to tell you what that is, because I can't just tell you everything, but once you do unlock that feature, it is helpful, but you move about 40% faster. It's not a big increase, but it is an incentive to go and find the ability to move a little faster on the overworld. Getting between places is fine, there's teleportation methods and some sailing methods that make that easy, but when you're in big dungeons and big overworlds, moving in them is hard. It takes a while. And don't even remind me about the last dungeon. I only passed this a couple of days ago as I'm recording this. The last dungeon. Just look at this. However, there is another good thing about the gameplay that I want to mention. The dismantle and improve system. It's actually pretty good. You can dismantle old equipment that you won't use, and stuff that you've just gathered. And you can improve and upgrade the equipment that you currently have. That comes with its own bonuses. There's things to discover when you do that. And equipment might even change name when you upgrade it a certain amount of times. So that's pretty cool. It's a pretty nice addition, and it makes for a means of grinding a bit better. Okay, so we've just covered all of the gameplay bits that kind of stuck out to me personally. We're going to go on to the next section, which is the characters. Oh yeah, this is going to be good.
Turn up! Resound! Arise! Become the blade of destruction! Frostbond! Go!
Right, Velvet. Our edgy female protagonist. Okay. You know, sometimes she is a bit cringe, and there's been plenty of times where I just kind of facepalmed when she very obviously states her motivations in the story.
That's how my powers work.
Velvet, I'm sorry.
I don't mind it. Actually, I find it convenient. This way, I'll never forget my hatred for Artorias.
Plus, as long as you stay away from an Earth Pulse point, you get to keep the power of any malevolence you consume.
Fuel for my hatred. Yes. Fuel for my hatred.
Yeah. But there is some interesting psychological distress interpretations in this game, so I quite like that. And there's also some character development, but it did come a bit late for my liking. For the most part, she is just a anti-hero, and she wants to have her own way. She's gonna do it her way and use whoever she wants to get there. But there, like I mentioned, there is some character development. It just came a bit too late. But the way she starts caring about the characters does present itself in a meaningful way. That was done really nice. Her interactions with the other characters, they're quite interesting to see. She's not cringe 70 to 80% of the time. It's easy to kind of see where she's coming from and to not feel bad playing as her, which I think is a very important thing. She does have more to her personality, and you find out as you go through the game. The protagonist is okay, it's a thumbs up, but it's not the greatest protagonist. So, what about the side characters? You know, the game's gotta have good side characters for it to be a good game, really. It definitely helps. So, these characters are actually done pretty nice. Eisen's obviously the best character. He just says his words of wisdom, and he just gets worked up over the strangest things. At first he's calm and collected, and then all of a sudden he's like, Rokuro's a good character too. He had some surprising elements. Eleanor was an instant hate, but she grew on me over time. And the other character, Laphicet, the young boy, he really irritated me at first, but then Laphicet became a very dynamic sort of character, and his progression was very easy to see. And then there's Magilu. I'm not sure what to say about this one. She's the strongest female character. She puts Velvet in her shadow easily. From the moment she stepped into the game, it instantly became a lot more enjoyable. She's the best girl. Best girl award goes to her. She's funny, she's witty, she says very strange things, and avoids most serious conversations.
My skin feels like a frozen shell, but somehow my insides are boiling! This is miserable! It should be one or the other. I can't stand this fence-sitting!
Oh? Well, so what about the pineapple and sweet and sour pork?
Gross! A sweet omelet? A crime against nature.
Chocolate-covered raisins?
Whoever thought up dried grapes should be hanged!
She has some character development too, but whenever she was serious, it always felt forced. It didn't feel like her. She's there for comedic relief, and even if that does make her one-dimensional, I think she was a strong enough character to handle that. Now, I know I said Eisen's my favourite character, but he fulfills my seriousness that I need from the game. Magilu fulfills my comedic value that I needed, and together it worked really well. So overall, our protagonist was pretty good, some issues, and it's enough to affect the rating overall. The characters were good, I did like most of them to be honest with you, albeit some small annoyances, but I think that was more part of the story than anything. Now we're going to move on to the story! Oh, just mention that!
Now, Army of Immortals! 49 souls! Will you withstand their assault?
So what's the story like, John? Well, it focuses on a darker sort of JRPG story. It's probably one of the darker ones out of all the Tales games as well. As I mentioned, the themes and the general sort of storyline is quite a vengeful sort of dark twist, and you do play as an anti-hero. The story has some political elements to it, in that it makes you question the people in charge in the game's world. It's powerful. Some bits are symbolic to the real world as well. You can see how it still applies to our world when you think about it, and it's very subtle, and that's what I really like about this. And overall, I found that it was executed pretty nicely. There's some emotionally powerful scenes, while some are more cringe-worthy than anything.
Fuel for my hatred.
The visual skits are nice, and I mentioned that plenty of times. They're a key plot-advancing element. The story is told really nice through these skits. You know, when it came to Eisen and Rokuro, they easily became the dad/brother dynamic for Laphicet, and Those interactions were really nice to see. It made for a really interesting story. Likewise, on the other hand, you have something similar with Velvet and Eleanor and Margilu. They, when everything's nice and settled, of course, they carry on as bantering sisters in a way. And it does work. For the most part, it's quite entertaining with some of the skits that happen, and it shows off their personalities and their attitudes towards each other. And you see how their attitudes towards each other do change as the story progresses. And you don't notice it at first, but then you see it, and it's really refreshing to see. It does add a nice dimension to the game.
Well, she must be doing something in there she doesn't even want a fellow woman to see.
Something she doesn't want seen. Do you think maybe she's weighing herself?
Probably not Rokuro. Anyway. As for the villains, the antagonists, they were really nicely done. There's some political to religious sort of elements to it, and it leaves the player wondering what they're doing. Is it right? Is it good? Is it bad? And as for the endgame, I didn't mind that it was getting a little predictable up to a point. But when the endgame actually happened, I was still quite invested with it. I didn't mind going through the final dungeon, even though it took ages. And I'm not kidding, it's a long final dungeon. I still think it was really good. I quite liked the story overall. There was really nice foreshadowing in the story up to a point as well, so that was a nice addition too. It gave you something to sort of cast your focus towards, and when you go for a second playthrough, you're gonna notice the foreshadowing plot elements here. Whew, man, right. We've finally come to the end of the review. Now we're going to go on to the closing comments. This is going to include... Nobody cares. Real short part this is. Thank you very much if you stuck around this long. Or if you skipped to this bit, I don't blame you.
No mercy! Wounds that won't heal!
Okay, game time. It's about 60 to 80 hours if you hunt some chests and generally keep your characters quite leveled. But you could probably pass it in about 50. If you skip all the skits and cutscenes and any sort of grinding, you can easily get down to 30 hours, no problem. Now, replayability? Yes, there is some replayability. You can take multiple playthroughs. There's side quests as well, and there's endgame things as well. You can also do some achievement hunting like you can on many other games. The post-game / extra stuff to do, they are worth doing, so that's fine. Okay. It's time to give it an overall rating, all things considered. What does this game get? This gets a 8 out of 10. Yeah, there's good characters, a good protagonist, a decent but repetitive OST, some lazy overworlds and dungeons, but they're still not bad. Good side quests as well. The protagonist was a bit cringe, but it is forgivable. All things considered, I think it does deserve an 8 out of 10.